I think that's inversely proportional to the amount that you drink before you enter said pizzeria.
I was stone cold sober. It was a static cling issue.
Welcome to Atlas Balked, a weekly chronicle concerning the mundane, weird, and maybe even sometimes dramatic happenings of a simple fantasy baseball league. This podcast captures the thoughts and musings of Greg, Joe, Jack, and Tim, 4 of the 10 owners in the league. This is episode 8, entitled Life Imitates Television. Okay, here we are, beginning of episode 8. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Joe, good to see you.
Hello.
Hello. And Jack?
Greetings from sunny Florida. How are you guys?
Doing well. So, Jack, we've got the Griffey division. Everybody's 2 and 3. And I think you did a little work. You were kind of texting me some stuff that you did, and we're looking at how the Griffey division was doing against the other 2 divisions, and some interesting stuff came up. So, what are you seeing?
The Griffey division is not holding up at this point. Once dubbed the Champions division, at this point we actually started out the first week. We all played each other, so obviously that didn't come into play. The second week, 2 of us played out of division, and we went 2-0 that week. Since then, we have gone 1-7 versus the rest of the league. So a total of 3-7 right now for the Griffey division, playing outside of the Griffey division, and it continued this week. A few things stood out. Obviously, Joe and his angry Manny Machado dropping a 7.8 on me. That wasn't very nice. I didn't appreciate that. The 2 things that really stood out for me this week were. We had Scotty on from the Omission Commission last week, and his team of the future scored 51 again, and is now currently tied for tops in the power poll. So that was interesting. The other thing that stood out was the fire sale and complete rejuvenation of one of our squads this week while they were winning, and are currently tied for first place in their division.
Interestingly enough, everybody that traded with Greg has some connection to the podcast. So Mikey told me that he actually altered his trading strategy once he listened to episode 7. So we'll have to ask him about that when he visits the podcast. Very interesting, right? However, being tied for first and shipping off the talent you shipped off, any regrets, Greg?
No, it's because it's not like I traded them for nothing. I think that on the whole, in terms of point production, I'm still, I might be a net benefit, in the present term. Now, tonight's action in the league made those trades. I'm the early loser on these trades based on just today's action. But no, Altuve is no slouch. And, I think that Suarez is good as well. So I think I upgraded my team now and for this year, and definitely for the future. And I'm going to be happy to tell you all about, now that the deal is done, Joe, why I think I got the better of you. But that's the fun of the game.
And I don't disagree with that. And I got something I needed. You got something you needed. And I had something to replace what I gave up. So I'm okay with it.
What was the trade with Joe?
I sent Posey and Cespedes and Franklin Burrito and Ozzy Albies to Joe in exchange for Altuve and Leody Taveras. My logic, of course, now that I can reveal it to Joe fully, is that I look at Posey as being primed to be moved right now, because the way I look at it, and history could prove me wrong. He's a future Hall of Famer, but I look at it as he is Joe Mauer in the waiting, meaning that he is either going to remain at catcher because he is a strong defensive catcher, but that will necessarily erode his power and even maybe his average, or they're going to place a premium on that offense, and so they're going to move him to first base, where he'll be a good first baseman, but not an elite first baseman. And so that's why I moved him. Cespedes, I just tired of him, like most people in our league do, and they wanted to trade him around. He goes on amazing hot streaks, but then he's unreliable. And then as far as the minor leaguers go, I really have a bloated roster. And so it was either drop some of these players or get a player in Leody Taveras who I had placed a premium on during the draft, but I hadn't been able to get him. And so Albies, I look like it. To me, he could be fantastic, or he could be another Alcides Escobar, who's a highly heralded but light hitting, fast type of middle infielder. And Burrito, I only had him for a week, so I wasn't that emotionally attached.
Yeah, and I think your assessment of the trade is pretty good. And Posey works for me because the catcher I would normally have in there, Ramos, is going to be out till the middle of the year, and my other catcher is a complete rookie who is up and down. I think he'll be okay, but Posey can provide me points right now, and I think he's going to catch enough this year that he's going to be available next year, and that's all I'm really looking at with it. Altuve, gotta love him. It was tough for me to part with him, but he's going to stand you in good stead for a while. And I agree with you about Taveras. That was actually the hardest part of that deal for me, because I think he's going to be really good. My outfield is not in great shape, and if I play him right, once he comes back, Cespedes might give me some value. I'm unfortunately now in the position you were in, where I have a bloated farm system, and fortunately for me, I have at least one player I'm not married to, and probably two, so I'm okay with it.
Well, yeah, and clearly we're playing for different years. I mean, I was happy to win last week. I'm always going to play to win. I'm never going to tank a season intentionally, but I'm playing to win this trade in 2019, and I feel like Altuve is built. He's 27. I think his game is built for some longevity. So in 3 or 4 years, I think Altuve will still be an elite player, where I think Posey will be a standout by catcher's standards, but not necessarily an elite fantasy player by fantasy standards.
And I would just like to point out that if I didn't have Posey, I wouldn't have any points at all tonight against you. So.
Well, I get it. I said, like, if they wanted to trade, I'm losing it clearly. I think Carpenter went along in my other big deal. But
I
the Yankees are
appreciate that.
pitching.
And what were your other big deals? I see a pitching staff that I traded to Tim that he couldn't live without is all of a sudden playing for a different team now.
So I need a staff that I can count on with the Yankees. There's a lot of young pitchers. They're having a great hot streak right now, both hitting and pitching. I think we all have played this game long enough to know what's coming. Maybe it's next week, maybe it's 3 weeks down the road, but I'm going to need a staff that I can count on and an organization that will make the investments that need to be made if that staff falters. And so for me, the Cubs made sense. But man, my team is just limping along. I'm not feeling confident about my team. I still am very unsettled. In the trade that you made, Joe, I think the Posey move to me was the one that made the most sense. Clearly, you believe in your team. You've been stating that all along, and you made the right investment at the right time, and you may end up paying for it. We all know how that feels 2 years, 3 years from now, and to see one of those players that you're never going to get back doing really well. But I think in the long run, Greg was pretty clear and it changed strategy and has stuck to that strategy. I mean, pretty clear.
In my defense for this year, though, Tim, Altuve's an upgrade for my roster right now, and Wieters is playing decently. And aside from last week, Carpenter wasn't exactly lighting it up. So I don't know that I got all that much worse in the moment.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you there. I think that for you, and you said it earlier on, you're not going to stop trying to win. It's just that the guys that you're going to win with have to have a longer window ahead of them as opposed to behind them. That's kind of what I heard from you. But I don't think by giving up Posey that you really think you've got a shot this year, because Posey's the type of guy that you want on a championship team. He's below his normal run rate right now. He's going to come back in the line unless there's an injury. I haven't heard that there's an injury with Posey, and he gets more at bats because he plays first base. The pop is definitely not there, but it's been kind of a nasty spring out here in the Northwest. So, maybe that's what it is.
And he did have a double and a home run tonight.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in real quick and make sure we didn't get too far away from you. You weren't legitimately comparing Posey and Wieters, right? I mean, at the moment, mathematically, yes, obviously that's the case, but in the long run, there's no comparison between those two.
No, I'm not comparing them, but I am saying that as far as catcher goes, in terms of differentiation, you got Posey, and then you got mostly everybody else.
Right.
So,
no, I agree.
So I've had Posey since he was in the minor leagues, and yet I've never won with him. So my thought is that I'd rather upgrade other positions, and that the spectrum between the elite catchers and the rest of the league isn't as marked as it is in other positions.
I will say that I made a similar move on a slightly lesser scale. Not before last season, maybe the prior year, I had Lucroy, and I felt kind of the same way. That was why I ended up doing it, gave him to Tim, and I've regretted it multiple times since. It's easy to say, oh, well, all the other catchers are the same. And first of all, if you have one, then you weren't the same. So you don't know what it's like. And then once you get into it, trust me, Greg, it's a whole lot more frustrating than you think it is after you've run with a Posey for a few years. So I understood both sides of the trade. I thought maybe I like Altuve a lot. I still thought maybe you could have got a little more if you had shopped Greg. I don't know, but I understood.
But I did shop. I did shop Posey around. I did make some other trade offers before I made offers to Joe, and I'll leave that for the other owners to share if they ever care to. But I did make other offers to people with Posey in the trade, and I thought they were on par and no takers.
And I would say that I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but Greg traded with me the way it works for me. I got something I needed. I gave up something I had surplus in. A lot of times when I get offered trades, they make no sense to me. And that's part of the reason I don't trade very much. Tim knows how to approach me with a trade. Jack, you and I have traded. It's been a long time since we have, but when I make a trade, it's got to benefit both sides.
So just to wrap this conversation up, Lethal Injection actually suffered their first loss. I'm really interested to see what Mikey's thoughts are on his team. St. Locash, Stinkfist, took a loss. It was a tough loss. I think he was feeling high for a few weeks. We'll see if he changes his name. Omission Commission, again, takes me out with a pretty strong week. I will say that Benintendi and his beautiful hair certainly played a big role. My boy in the Red Sox, man, he got me.
Greek godlike. Yeah.
Told me at the building
Okay, I'm excited about this. We have Mikey, who is the owner of Lethal Injection. Mikey has been playing fantasy sports for a long, long time, and I have a lot of fond memories of watching ESPN Going, Gone at Mikey's girlfriend's house, where we would all hang out. And that was a big thing. We'd all gather around the television. This was before smartphones. This was before the internet really was the internet. And we would hang out and watch Going, Gone. And it was some of the best fun I can ever remember of watching fantasy baseball. And it's probably why I always overvalue power. If I really think back to it, it's because I wanted my guy to come up on Going, Gone. And it was always frickin' Mikey's guy or Jack's guy. So that's really where it comes from. So, Mikey, thank you for being a part of this. I know the guys are really excited to have you be a part of this. And Jack and I.
What's up, Mikey?
What's up?
Let's talk a bit about you as a Braves fan. Now, you grew up in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and obviously the Braves are far away. But when you were young, when we were kids, the Marlins and the Rays, or at that time the Devil Rays, didn't exist.
All I had was good old TBS and Ted Turner to watch my Braves.
And so that's what it is. So that's because the Cubs also, right? Weren't the Cubs on down in Port St. Lucie, or was it just the Braves?
But the Braves, when Ted Turner owned TBS, he televised every single game. And I'm talking like back when Chris Chambliss and Glenn Hubbard and the old Braves, like the real old Braves. So that's why I've stuck with the Braves. I started watching sports in the early 80s, and the Braves were pretty good and they were on TV, so I went with them.
So you have some of your earliest memories of the Braves. Now, you couldn't go to the ballpark, you couldn't see them, so it was all television for you. So did you have a favorite player? Did you have a team that really kind of sticks out to you as you became aware of baseball?
My favorite player is Chipper Jones on the Braves. He's my favorite all-time Brave, and then I like, believe it or not, I like Fred McGriff.
The crime dog.
The crime dog.
I love it. So Chipper Jones,
Yeah.
So you had an opportunity. Now, were you hip to him when he came in as a rookie? So did you see his entire career from the very beginning all the way to the peak?
I did, but I didn't. It wasn't like I predicted it. But yeah, I seen it. I knew he was going to be good. I knew we had a decent third baseman that could switch hit, but I didn't know it was going to turn out to be a beast like he was. But I knew he was there. I knew he was good. I knew he had something.
That's exciting. When you think about the Braves too, and you think about back in the early 80s and what they did in the 80s and 90s and just how awesome they were.
Pitching.
They
had the big three. They had Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz.
And they rode them for a long time.
And that's why we won the division every single year, was because those guys. The batting never, the batting, one year we'd have Terry Pendleton win the batting title, then he'd hit 270. I mean, the batting was always here and there, but the pitching was always solid. Always solid.
Did you appreciate the pitching when you were younger?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. I really didn't, because I was more into the batting. I appreciated Greg Maddux. I never really appreciated Glavine as much as I should have. Maddux was my guy, and then Smoltz was my guy once it became a closer. So it's always been pitching. And right now, in our farm leagues right now, you'll see how much pitching we have in like 3 years, because it's coming.
Yeah, it seems like they're going through the same cycle they did back in the 80s and 90s.
And the crazy thing about it is now their new ballpark looks like it's a home run jack park. So that's going to be interesting to see what their philosophy is, whether they still try to go for pitchers, or in this next draft they start trying to go for some hitters, because it's pretty obvious that the new park is a home run haven.
Are you a believer in Freddie Freeman? Do you think he's real? You think he's going to hit 40?
I think that now that we have that park, he's definitely going to be one of the top 10 players in our league. Before that park, I wasn't so sure of it, but they built that park to him. They built the right center field walls like 4 feet lower and like 25 feet shorter. That's tailor-made to him.
Mikey, I staked my reputation on the fact that I don't think Freddie Freeman would be a top 30 player in our fantasy league, and you just shit all over that.
I'm very sorry about that, but after 2.5 years, I'm a believer.
I'm with you, Mikey.
So Freddie Freeman for real. And, when you think about the ballparks in the NL East, with the exception of the Mets, they're all pretty small. And so maybe you just build a small ballpark and you build a pitching staff that is ground ball heavy and strikeout heavy, and try to keep away from the fly balls. It seems like that's what the Phillies are doing, right?
It's going to be interesting to see how the Braves go because their last few trades have been for all pitching. So it don't matter how small the park is if the other team can't touch the ball.
So, I mean, clearly you're someone who loves baseball. And it's something that you and I connected on from the very day that Boris brought me to your house and we're hanging out on the porch and having a good time. And you're an entertainer at your core anyway, and you have that great laugh. And we're always talking about baseball, and you're giving me shit about being a Red Sox fan, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
You played fantasy baseball much younger than many of us played fantasy baseball. So normally I like to find out, hey, has playing fantasy baseball changed the way that you have become change your relationship with the game of baseball, the actual Major League Baseball?
Absolutely. Before fantasy baseball, I would not watch a Dodgers game. Didn't like the way Vin Scully did the announcing. Didn't like the Dodgers. But now they have Jock Peterson and Corey Seager, and they're worth watching. So, yeah, it's definitely changed the way I watch baseball, 100%. I pay attention to teams that I never would have paid attention to for the players and for the players that are coming up so I can get them before you guys do.
Mikey, I got to jump in here and applaud you. I've never liked Vin Scully. He seems like a nice fellow and all, but he's boring.
Very boring.
And just by himself all the time. I really dislike that, and I'm glad he's retired, and I hope he's happy.
I am too, and I can tell you that when I would watch the Dodgers games, I would turn the volume down and put some music on. I can't stand him, so yeah, I understand that definitely.
But I did love Skip Carey. Skip Carey, I loved. I used to watch a lot of TBS Braves game back in the '80s when you couldn't even watch your home team on TV regularly. And you're right, Ted Turner put all those games on there, and Skip Carey at some of the funniest calls when the Braves were awful. Just like this woe-begotten, well, fans, we had another tough loss today, but who cares? We're at the ballpark. Yeah. It was all these really
it's a beautiful day here, and everybody just had a couple hot dogs and some beers, and who cares that we lost 6-2, folks? It was a beautiful day.
Well, if you were in the stands, you didn't miss anything except for the Braves taking another drubbing. But back to the seventh, Yeah,
exactly. So, yeah. I don't mind any other announcer, but Vin Scully, I just couldn't do it. Every other announcer I've ever heard never bothered me. So it's definitely changed the way I watch baseball.
He's a menace. 100%.
Oh, come on now. Vin Scully is a master storyteller. And when you talk about tradition in baseball, Greg, that he is an institution or was an institution.
Maybe he should have quit 15 years ago.
Wow. Okay. All right. Fair enough. So back to the relationship. So what you're saying is that you expanded who you paid attention to. So once you got into fantasy baseball, you really kind of broadened and you wanted to know who was doing well, who was hot. And obviously now, so when we take a look at Lethal Injection and we broke down your team earlier on in the season, one of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that you've spent some time, Mikey, on really getting the prospects that are going to help you out. I mean, I look at Alex Jackson right now, look at Brinson in Milwaukee, Acuna in Atlanta is, that guy, could be special, right? Luis Robert, an export from the island that somebody else apparently wanted but couldn't get, Greg. And then I just look at your active roster, right? Look at Chris Bryant, look at Anthony Rizzo. And, these are guys that, are going to be around for years, just years, right? Power, average, on base. Anthony Rizzo is interesting, former Red Sox prospect. I knew of him, but I didn't believe in him. And then we went down to San Diego, didn't seem to really be able to put it all together. But apparently Theo did believe so and got him to the Cubs. You were a believer early on. Was there something that you saw, something that you read? Did you watch a minor league game? Like, how did you pick up on that? Because it seems like you hit.
They changed his swing when he went to San Diego. So once they changed his swing, if you look from the time they changed his swing in the minors, from the time his numbers went up. So, and he was just dominating the AAA scene. And, some guys dominate AAA forever and never make the majors, and some guys hit, like Nelson Cruz. Nelson Cruz dominated AAA for 5 or 6 years before anybody gave him a shot. Now look at him.
So how did you? So basically, you somehow found out that he changed his swing. You watched his stats in AAA, and that's what did it for you?
Yeah, I like to go back to the AAA stats, and I like to, obviously I know I don't really have much of a life, so I watch a lot more Sports Center and TV and read a lot more on the baseball than the average Joe. So when I find a guy that I like, I like to follow him and follow him along. Just because he's not successful in the first 3 or 4 years, I don't forget his name.
Yeah, you've always been somebody who we would look to. I know, even when we were in the phone room, 2+ decades ago, as who had really good information. It wasn't that easy to get the information back then, but you would put your time in on ESPN.
Peter Gammon.
And Peter Gammon.
Peter Gammon's my boy, dude.
Yeah,
and you get lucky once in a while. You guys remember when I drafted Pujols? We didn't even know how to say his name.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I just want to jump in for some of the newer guys in the league, and back in the day before Tim started dominating, and even before I started dominating, there was Mike. Mike probably has more fantasy championships than the rest of us combined, even today. So yeah, he's always been one that dug a little deeper, went a little further, and granted, with the information age, it's allowed us all to catch up a little bit, thank God, with the with the internet and the other resources that we have now. But yeah, Mike, these were his leagues for quite some time back in the 90s, early 2000s.
Nice little run.
I wouldn't call it little.
We're all even now, though. It's all the same. We're all this league is nice and even. There's not it's nice.
Even other than the fact that at the moment Mike has the best record and the most points and is currently tops in the power poll as well. Thankfully, he did suffer his first loss this past week, but still 2 games ahead of everybody else here.
Yeah, I like my team. I like the mixture of my team, and I just made a trade the other day for Matt Carpenter for Eugenio Suarez because I needed a middle infield and he needed a third baseman. So I feel like that strengthened my team a lot, believe it or not. Going from Zobrist to Carpenter seems like a nice move for me.
Yeah, those playing him appreciate that, Greg, by the way.
Yeah, the triple and I think 2 walks and a couple RBIs already today.
Well, welcome to Lethal Injection, Matt Carpenter.
So when I think about the team that you built, over the last couple of years, I think you've had some bad luck. You've had some injuries hit you at the wrong time. You had a couple of games
Everybody has that, yeah.
Yeah, and you just rolled with it. You have such an awesome just kind of outlook and approach, and you just keep it steady. You have a very good baseball mind. You don't get too high, you don't get too low, and you keep plugging along. But what's been your strategy in building your team? I mean, your team, especially with Carpenter, I was bummed out when I saw that because you don't need more depth if I want to try to beat you. And when I saw Carpenter and where he can play, you can plug him in, and he's at least better than average in 3 of the 4 positions he's eligible for. So, that was a tough thing for me to see. Great move on your part. Do you have an overarching strategy? Is this something that has been a culmination of what you've been building for?
Well, without giving too much away, I kind of talked to Jack about this the other day.
No. You're on the podcast. This is it's a trust tree. You here.
Okay.
Nobody would ever use any information passed around during the podcast to benefit themselves in any way, shape, or form. Trust me.
I would say this, Tim, because everybody in the league, there's nobody in the league that doesn't pay attention in this league. Everybody's in it to win it. Everybody's, either building net for now or building for the future. So what I've found is there's not a lot of Americans left that aren't taken. So the last 2 to 3 years, I've been concentrating on the international market, and I've been paying my international scouts good money to find me some good international prospects. And I believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a wave of international prospects like we've never, ever seen in baseball before. And I believe that once that happens, it won't stop.
So basically, what you're saying is that, I agree with you. This league was built for people who are actively involved in the league. And if they're not trying to win hard this year, that they're building for the following years, and they're still going to put the best team out there every week, week in, week out.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. And that's something that playing in other fantasy leagues, I realize that there's a group of guys or folks who just kind of fade away. And it really takes away from the league, I think. And
Absolutely.
in this league, man, last season, I think there were 8 teams that were still in the running with 2 weeks to go. Is that right, Jack? Does that sound right to you?
That does sound, yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get a week off. We're looking at this now and saying, I think maybe Bad Street is at the point where they really are having to do an overhaul, like a complete overhaul. They just can't generate the points. And I actually think that, Mike is doing that. But, the reality is that, the other 9 teams, any given week, you could run into a buzzsaw.
Absolutely.
Now, but one of the things that Joe picked up on was your scoring is pretty consistent. Do you particularly look for players? Are there certain things that you look for in a player that they have? Every player has their highs and their lows, but it seems like, your team this year has been a steady producer of points, where some of our teams are just, a lot of points and a little points and a lot of points, and little points. And that's a tough one to win this league in.
Well, Tim, one of the things that I've always done and on base percentage, a walk is just as good as a hit, man. So if you got somebody who's hitting 270 as an on base percentage of 400 compared to somebody who's hitting 300 with an on base percentage of 320, all those extra walks are points. And if you have somebody who steals bases when they get on base for those walks, Jack, you'll know what I'm talking about. My dad, up until a couple years ago, has always had a team that on one week could score 60 and the next week could score 35.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He has guys like Mark Reynolds before this week was a perfect example of one of those guys. He could have an 8 and then the next week have a 1.5. I don't ever get guys like that on my team. I would much rather take a solid 4 or 5 than get an 8 and then a 2. That's just the way I've always built. It doesn't always work, but if you're talking about consistency, that's why I'm always consistent, because I don't go for the guys who are 8s and then 2s. I go for the solid 5s.
That makes perfect sense, and I'm going to change my strategy to get international guys that score 4 to 6 points a week. I mean, that's just pretty simple, man. That's just, you do what the winners do. And right now, Mikey, it's looking really good. Super impressed with who you are as a person. I mean, I've known you and just been happy to be your friend for a long, long time, and I'm really happy that we still have this connection.
There's one thing I wanted to bring up that's kind of interesting. I don't want to take too long, but it's an interesting point. Back in the day when we used to play fantasy baseball, we didn't go by games played. We went by an average score for the week. So if you had guys that only played 3 days, as long as they got a good score in one of those 3 days, they would average that score. So in other words, like now, if you have a guy who plays 3 out of 6 days, he only gets 3 scores. Back in the day, he got an average score. So if he got 3 8s and only played 3 days, he used to get an 8. You remember that?
Got us.
So that changed. Once we changed the rules to that, everybody had to take like a year or 2, even 3 years to change their teams to get to where they want, because guys that weren't playing every single day were no longer valuable. And then if you remember, the reason we changed that was because once in a while a guy would pinch hit. And then we had to decide whether that was going to count as a game or not, remember? And then if he got hit by a pitch, then he didn't have a chance to get any points. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah,
remember what
absolutely.
I'm talking about?
Yep.
And that's why we changed the rules. So
Yep.
The landscape of fantasy baseball has changed completely in just our league by that alone.
Yeah, we've talked about a few times just how this league just has a life of its own, and we've been able to kind of alter it and move with different scenarios, different situations, and it's one of the cool things about this league from the start.
So, Mikey, I've peppered you with questions for a good 25 minutes now. Let's turn this around. What questions do you have for the other owners in this league? What secrets do you want to pull from Greg or from Joe or from Jack? And
all the guys you're beating right now.
right.
First of all, I'd just like to say to Joe, congratulations on your last trade. I think it was a wonderful trade for you, and you filled holes on your team. I think that your team is scary as hell now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. When you're looking for a player, like a prospect, do you go to single A and double A, or do you just wait till they get to triple A? And the reason I'm asking that is because if you look at the last 7 or 8 great players to come into the Major League Baseball, they skipped triple A.
They skipped it, yeah.
No,
absolutely.
I will tell you that my edge for a long time was the prospect game. That I spent a lot of time understanding prospecting, understanding what that meant, identifying sources. I didn't freaking befriend someone who's a freaking scout, but I spent years literally saying, this is my edge. Nobody's going here. I'm going to take my medicine for years. And it paid off in a big way for me, because I was able to compete with a younger team that was able to surprise on the upside, to use Scotty's words from last couple episodes ago, or last episode. Last episode. Thank you, Jack. So for me, prospecting was big, and it's really difficult to look at someone who's in low A and try to project out. So Ronald Acuna is someone that I was following in low A. And what's happened now is I used to be able to see these guys, Mikey, in low A, high A, even into double A. But what I started to notice was that in this league, because people are competing so hard and because it's a dynasty league without any limits, so finding that great player who's young and you get him on your team and you stick with him. If he's a superstar, you have him until he retires if you want. And
That's
so
correct.
for me, that was the thing. Now I'm feeling a lot of heat. I too tried to go to the international side, and that's when I started to really pay attention to what you were doing, because I started to see that you had guys in your team that weren't showing up when I searched, but I had to go and look at the teams individually, and we were putting in names for you on your team. You probably have the highest number of guys that we actually had to create their player profiles on CBS Sports, and that's when I started to realize. Yeah. Yep. And
I think in both leagues I have the most international prospects, I believe.
Yeah.
Like I said, I started doing that about 3 years ago. I started looking international.
But my question is, how do you discount? How do you look at those players' stats and say, you know what, this player is someone that I'm going to use 10% of my minor league spots? How do you discount for the league that they're in and say?
I'll tell you one thing that's helped a lot, Tim, and that's the World Baseball Classic. Because during the World Baseball Classic, not only do they have the international players, but they talk about the guys who are going to be on the team next year or the next 4 years. And those are the guys that you want to find. And I'll just leave it at that.
So 23 years ago, right, I watched your fucking method was to watch TV more than anyone else. What you're telling me right now is, motherfuckers, I'm still going to watch more TV than you, and I'm going to get – now it's just on the international stage.
My TV time is undeniable, baby. 45 years old and no kids. I have more TV time. And that definitely helps. But watching the World Baseball Classic, and I really enjoy the World Baseball Classic. Like I really, really do enjoy it. I like the way they're allowed to show enthusiasm and everything like that. But aside from that, if you listen to the announcers and they're talking about the Korean center fielder, they'll talk about the guy who's going to be there next time the World Baseball Classic comes around. The guy who's 20, who's fucking stealing 80 bases a year and is hitting 370 and that's the one that you want to find, because the guys that are in the World Baseball Classic are already on people's team.
So basically what I need to do is actually start paying miles to watch baseball games, the international baseball games, and just get information. So essentially, I'm having to now build a scouting staff just to compete with your friggin' team.
I mean, there's only so many spots. There's only so many roster spots left. But I mean, yeah, that's where a lot of my international interest has come from. And there's some really good international players that are not on my team. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is coming up soon, guys.
He's on my team. He's on my team.
He's a badass, dude. He's going to be a badass. I look at things every time there's something new on the internet, I read it about him, and he's becoming more and more like his father every single day, and that doesn't suck.
He's raking in single A right now.
Raking. He's going to be one of those guys that goes single A, double A, pro. He's not going to even make triple A. That's my opinion, though. But there's a lot of guys that are on, the league. The league has everybody, and I only have so many of them, so everybody has them. It's just that I just seem to have a few more of them.
Do you watch the Futures game the same way, or are those guys already gone by the time that's on?
The Futures game is a huge deal. The Futures game is a huge deal because they have the USA team and they have a team called the World Team. The catcher for the World Team is a guy named Jorge or Alfaro, who catches for the Phillies. And if you watch the World Baseball Classic, that dude's big. And he was hitting home runs like Jose Abreu, and he's coming up soon. So people like that, yeah, definitely the World Baseball Classic. And then, when it comes time for the baseball draft, now a lot of the draft is international players now. So between the World Baseball Classic and the baseball draft is where in the last 3 years, I got Chris Bryant on the baseball draft. Everybody had a chance to get him. He was there the day before the baseball draft is when I drafted Chris Bryant, guys. So it's a lot of luck, but when you hit, you hit.
Yeah, this league has just gotten so deep, and like I said, everybody pays so much attention that it's just it's changed. Like you said, Tim, to know who was hot in AAA used to be a big deal. That's not even a second thought at this point. I don't even bother for the most part. I mean, the time I pay attention to prospects, like Mike says, before the draft, the actual MLB draft, before the draft, and before the futures game, when the lineups come out and so on and so forth, before you hear about the guy that hit the 2 home runs, that's your shot. And now it's everyone's shot. As far as our draft goes, by that time this year, I took 2 major league players and a high school kid. I just skipped the minors. I knew they were all there. Everybody had them. The guys that I didn't have a high pick. So I took a shot with a high school kid, and I'll usually reserve 1 to 2 spots in my minors for guys that I think I got I think he's 18 now. I've had him for a couple of years, but I'll keep some teenagers down there and hope, because at this point you almost have a better shot there than you do, working out of the 70 to 150 rankings of prospects, which is almost where we're at this point.
I got an interesting fact for you. I've never drafted anyone out of high school.
Really?
Ever. I would much rather take a chance on somebody who's had success in college or success in low A or double A before I take a chance on someone who's coming from high school.
It's a long road.
That's the way I've always done it. I've never drafted a high school kid. It's kind of funny. Chris Benigno drafts all high school kids. And who knows? In 3 or 4 years, I'm starting to hear some of those names that he drafted a couple of years ago out of that high school book. Starting to hear some of those names, those Kyle Skipworth and stuff like that.
Yes, was it one of them Bryce Harper?
Yeah. Like I said, it doesn't make it right, but I've never drafted a high school kid ever.
It's there's for every Bryce Harper, there's who knows how many thousands of that don't make it. I've started actually having Dante jot down names at school, at his high school. So.
Yo, is that dude fast? Give me his name.
So, Mikey, speaking of high school, Rick Ankiel, big player out of Port St. Lucie. Did you play at the same time that he did?
No, he was a little bit after me. I'm 45.
Okay, so he was
a little bit after me, probably between around 8 to 10 years after me.
Did you ever get a chance to see him play?
I heard of him. I knew of him. Unfortunately for him, what he was known for in Port St. Lucie was his father was busted for a huge shipment of drugs.
Yep.
And that's what he was known for in Port St. Lucie. His dad was a drug kingpin and got busted. But as far as baseball goes, I never played with him, and I knew of him. He was pretty popular. He's probably Charles Johnson, the catcher that used to be on the Marlins. He came out of the same high school as I went to. He's more of a person that I could relate to. He was more of my time. And remember Charles Johnson?
Oh yeah, we talked about Charles Johnson actually in Jack's weird attraction to Charles Johnson.
Yeah, he came from Fort Pierce, which was where I went to high school at. So I was during his time. Rick Ankiel was a little bit later.
So one of the things and Greg and Joe don't know this, but Jack and I played softball with you, and you're a hell of a baseball player and have a beautiful swing. And,
good defense too, man. Don't rip my defense, son.
Third base.
Yeah. Right.
Third base defense. Stop.
Yeah. I guess the point was our team needed the offense, and that's what I really focused on. Let's just be honest. Where I was more of a Mark Grace type of first baseman where I'd poke it over the shortstop. You had some legitimate power, and you could put it over the fence anytime you wanted. That swing was beautiful. Was it not, Jack?
Absolutely. Yep.
Well,
I got to see it. Most of the time I saw it from the dugout after I didn't get on base very often.
That is a true story. Now, so we said Nolan Arenado is your baseball doppelganger. However, and I know you took that as a compliment, and we'll keep that. We'll roll with that. But
mostly because he's a great defensive player, but yes, I'll take it.
But I came across, and I verified with Jack, there's a pitcher for the Houston Astros. This guy's name is Charlie Morton, and this motherfucker looks exactly like you. I
know who Charlie Morton is.
Former Pirate.
Yeah.
I can see it for sure. I
you
watched
see it?
Charlie Morton get knocked around on many an occasion.
Well, he's a lot better looking than fucking
Yeah.
Kevin Schiraldi, who is my goddamn baseball doppelganger.
Hey guys, John Kruk. So no complaining.
John Kruk. That's it, dude.
Right?
Good one.
But
Good one.
But
Like
a
that.
badass baseball player. Let's just get that just straight up, right?
I see it. He's got my little beard thing going, dog.
Right?
Certainly does.
I'm not sure which one's you.
Take it. I'll take his salary too.
Dude, I looked at that and I said, "Oh my gosh." Like maybe Mikey plays baseball. We don't know. I have no idea. Like that I was shocked. I was like, "Wow, that looks
I'd be a third baseman, not a pitcher, Tim. Thanks.
That's right. That's right. But third baseman, there's a lot of kids that play third base that end up converting to pitcher because you got to have an arm.
That's true.
You got to have an arm.
That's
Charlie
true.
Morton should be in prison for stealing with that contract he got from the Astros. Like 2 years, $11 million, and he's never been good. He's terrible.
Yeah.
Well, Mikey,
It's not John Singleton stealing though.
Well, Mikey, this has been a lot of fun, and we really
Yes, sir.
appreciate you calling in to the Atlas Balked podcast. And certainly the invitation is open any other time you want to come in. It was fascinating listening to you talk about your team strategy and how you construct the team. And certainly when I'm looking at the scores, and this year it really seems like it's paying off, and you are definitely a team that we're watching.
I'm coming. I'm coming.
Greg, how about the Pirates? Any chance they make some noise in the NL Central?
No, I think there's no chance that they make any noise in the division. And I think that while they may have been on the precipice of calling it a year, I think the last few days have all but sealed that decision to the point where, and I'm often critical of ownership of the Pirates, the Nuttings. But now I kind of agree with them that I would just kind of use this as a do-over year. I mean, in the last week, so our arguably our best starter this year, Jameson Taillon, today had surgery. He started having groin discomfort over the weekend, so they took him for an examination, and the kid has what they believe to be testicular cancer, and they operated on him today. So our fourth starter, Chad Cool took not one but two hits off the kneecap last week in a start, and they had to yank him out of the game. They're clearly avoiding bringing up their most important prospects, Austin Meadows. Any of my Pittsburgh friends who think that he has a chance of seeing the majors this year, maybe outside of September, is crazy. And I don't think they'll bring up any of their other solid pitchers.
Do you think Meadows will come up after June 1, where then it
No,
basically...
absolutely not.
You don't?
No chance. Zero chance. Because they're going to be terrible this year. I mean, Polanco is their cleanup hitter, and Polanco hasn't hit a home run in the last 250 or so at bats dating back to last year. He has 6 RBIs, He's our cleanup hitter. Today they called up Chris Bostic, who we picked up in a trade with the Nationals, and we called up Max Moroff, who was our Player of the Year a couple of years ago, but he's a a middling prospect at best, and we have him and Gift Nagope, which is he's a great story and a cool dude and a good fielder, but they're bringing up their prospects 30 to 60 to fill their major league roster because they're just they're going to wait. They're going to wait till next year and play it safe. John Jaso is leading off and playing right field on a regular basis.
So how do you balance that? So if you're the GM, right? The city of Pittsburgh and the people of Pittsburgh love their sports teams. But, isn't there a point where people are just going to say, screw it, I'm not going to...
No, not as long as Zambelli Fireworks doesn't run out of fireworks, and we can have all the fireworks nights that our heart content, and as long as Styx and Uriah Heep keep touring and are willing to play after games, and as long as they still invite, pets to the park, and they have all-you-can-eat hot dogs, then no, there's no need to worry about the fan base because the greatest Pirate team is going to draw $2.8 million. The worst Pirate team is going to draw $2.4 million, and they'll just raise the price of pierogis to make up the difference.
Sounds like you think McCutch is gone, right? They're just going to get what they can from McCutch.
Well, yeah, at this point now, I've resigned myself to the situation. I'd like him to be gone, but I'd sure as hell like him to start hitting so we can get something decent for him. I think at this point we're just going to be willing to unload his salary and get some, middling prospect, and we'll just call it a win because we get relieved of half his year's final, $14 million salary or whatever it is. And they're going to call that a win, but they're not going to bring up Austin Meadows. They're not going to bring up Mitch Keller. They're not going to bring up Kevin Newman. They're not going to bring up any of their decent prospects or Brian Hayes. I mean, guys, for those you've been trading him around the league, I hate to say it, but the Pirates are responsible for that kid's development, and so that doesn't bode well for whoever has him. Unfortunately, I know I sound super cynical, but I know what I speak. Unfortunately.
Okay, well that does sound super cynical, and
here's how cynical it is. I'll say one last thing on the Pirates and Tyler Glasnow, their number one prospect, who really shit the bed his first few starts this year. I'm not in the mind of nutting in Littlefield or GM, but I bet that they were wildly disappointed that he had two good starts recently. I have this sick feeling that they would have been happier if they'd been given a justification to ship him back down to AAA to work on his command and to stop the clock on his free agency. But, to their probably dismay, he actually had two good starts recently, and so now they can't justify it, and fool the ignorant masses that they're actually still trying.
It's a tough. I mean, if you're managing a small market team, the way baseball is set up, it is tough. The calculus that you have to work through to manage a team and to manage the fan base, and especially a fan base that is as committed as it is to the Pirates. I mean, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, I can't. I imagine. I guess I just would wish for a little bit more deliberation in their actions. Either say, hey, listen, guys, let's be realistic. We're going to put a fun team out there. We're going to compete, but hey, but call it what it is. But no, that's not what they're going to do. They're like, you know what? We're going to run out Gift Nagope and Phil Gosselin at third and Alan Hansen at short, and we're going to do just fine.
So, Yankees, are they for real? I mean, 21-9. Their pitching's been lights out. Their offense is awesome. Is this the Yankees coming of age more quickly than we thought they were going to?
I think that their starting pitching is going to fade come the middle of the season. And what they're doing right now is they're making it a 6-7 inning game. You're not winning coming the 6th, 7th inning, and you got to go to Betances and then Chapman, aside from the other night with the Cubs. Game's over. So they've basically done what Kansas City did when they won the World Series a couple of years ago and turned it into a 7-inning game.
So do you think that it's the starting pitching that will break down, that the second time around the league, that the people are going to figure out this starting pitching?
Severino is young. He's an upcoming pitcher. I believe in him. I think he's got 97, 98 mile-an-hour fastball. I think Sabathia is going to start getting hit soon if he doesn't go on the DL. He's old. He doesn't throw hard. Jordan Montgomery's another one who's not going to have a 3.6 ERA at the end of the season. And Tanaka is, they have Tanaka and Severino as their starters. And after that, I don't think that they have enough to stay strong. I can say this, though. They are doing all this without Gary Sanchez. They're doing all this batting without Gary Sanchez. Has been hurt for the last 3 weeks. So if he comes and starts on his 35-40 homer pace, the Yankees could be serious.
Judge but I think, where he let off.
I think they're weaker. They're weak in the field too, though. You know what I mean? Brett Gardner. He's okay. Chase Headley. Are they really going to depend upon him for a full year's production? I think Austin Romine started at first base for them tonight. That's not a line. That's not Murderer's Row exactly either.
No, and the pitchers are going to adjust at that level, and then it's going to be up to those young hitters to adjust to the pitching.
Is Judge going to keep this run up?
Right.
That guy is. There's nobody hitting as well as he is right now.
How could he? Is that possible?
Like I said, I think the pitchers are going to adjust to him, and it's going to be up to him to make adjustments back.
He's another one of those guys that changed his swing in the offseason, and it's been paying off since spring training. So
somebody's going to find a hole in it.
His swing's too big. I think he's going to be the Brendan Bosch. He's going to have a great April, but then he'll lose himself in that big looping swing, and he'll regress back to his AAA, AA numbers.
I just think that being able to play in that park 81 games, that's 30 home runs right there.
Yeah, that's I treated Judge like a bitch. I really did, and I'm regretting it right now. I think that the league does adjust. This is a brutal league, and I think it truly. You look at players like a Bryce Harper or somebody of that stature, right? Just a superstar, that they're able to make those adjustments and make them well. But it's fascinating, and just watching prospects fail in the minor leagues and then overcome that really, really is impressive. So I do think Judge is knocking it right now, but he literally has the largest strike zone of any player in the Major League Baseball. And if I looked at Judge and I look at Giancarlo Stanton, I would say that Giancarlo Stanton is probably a better hitter, and Giancarlo Stanton is right now hitting up just above 250. Which is all right with the power he's got. And I think that's where Judge settles in.
Hold on, one more thing. He was hitting 7th up until about 4 games ago. Now he's hitting 3rd. When the pitchers get it started in the game, he knows when he gets to that 3, 4, 5, that's where the juice is. Now that he's hitting in the 3-hole, everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows that he's expected to do it. And now I think is when he's going to start, his numbers are going to start slipping. And I don't think he's a 3-hole hitter, which means he'll be in the 5.
Solid 5 or 6 spot. Yep. I agree with you.
So, excellent. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, and I think it's the right way to look at it. And frankly, as a Red Sox fan, I hope the hell you're right.
Amen, brother.
So, Jack, if we take a look at the NL East, right? Washington, do they see any competition?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Yeah, there you are. Currently 5.5 games up, I believe. Now, granted, I think we talked about them last week, and for a moment there, my Phillies were as close to them as any other team in that division.
Right.
The Mets are making the run, so the Mets are the only team that they really need to pay attention to at this point, I think. So keep an eye on that, but no, I think the Nationals run away from this division. I don't think it's going to be close. In fact, I think we talked about that and some of the things it could do to fantasy. Some of these guys taking some extra days off later on in the year. I think it's going to be that kind of team. I think they're going to destroy this division. I think it's going to be over by the break. And you got one of the, if not the child of baseball in Harper, Trey Turner. Again, not quite the pace of last year, but that was a little ridiculous. But that guy's settling in. The pitching they got, Rendon's on a little run now. That guy could easily, was once one of the top prospects, top expects. So I think this
Ryan
is
Zimmerman.
Yes. Oh yeah. Not to mention that guy.
Don't forget about him.
It's okay. There's an injury coming for Ryan. I'm not worried about that. There's a hamstring, a forearm.
That I don't necessarily expect to
Another guy that changed his swing in the offseason.
That's interesting. I wouldn't bet on, but I do expect him to run away with it. And I think I picked him last year out of the National League, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens again this year.
I fully suspect that Terry Collins will be on the unemployment line before the All-Star break. He's focused on doing afternoon bed checks on his starting pitching staff rather than strategizing for the game. Did you guys see that story about Matt Harvey over the weekend and then the follow-up shenanigans today? So he went golfing, then he had a headache, which I can only imagine how infuriated I would be or if one of my employees said, Craig, I'm sorry, I got such a headache golfing this morning. I'm not going to be able to come into work. That aside, Terry Collins that guy has alligator blood, if anybody does. Sending two Mets organizational staffers to Matt Harvey's house to knock on Matt Harvey's door. And the story is that Matt Harvey answered the door today in his pajamas because Terry Collins was concerned that he wasn't really sick or he wasn't at home. I find that incredible. There's no way that Terry Collins makes it throughout this year. No way. And he's a former Pirates organization minor league manager. I like the guy. I respect the guy, but he is just not cut out for the New York market when he's sending people to, check on Matt Harvey in his pajamas.
That's an interesting thing, Greg. So let's think about the Juiceless League for a second, right? And let's just pretend that we are the GMs for other owners. But if you were to look at the Juiceless League right now, who would be on the hot seat?
Bad Street.
Bad Street? Yeah, I would definitely think that Pop's team would be on the hot seat for sure.
And Greg, that's my dad, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've met your dad. I've had lunch with him a couple of times when I lived on the East Coast. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think I'd be on the hot seat, if my trades are viewed through the prism of the now, I'm making trades for 2 to 3 years from now. I'm rebuilding my team. And so, I think it's probably commonly held perception that I got the worst of these last 2 or 3 trades, but it's all part of a grander scheme. So I think in the real world, I would be in a hot seat because we're in a win now society. Nobody wants to hear about a 5-year plan. So right. I think I'd firmly place myself on the hot seat.
Well, wouldn't everybody in the Griffey division be in the hot seat right now?
Right. Pretty much. I was going to say just the people that are on this podcast, except Mike. I think, a matter of fact, I think I was the only one that didn't get at least a vote for expected champion in one of the early podcasts. So with all of us sitting at 2 and 3, but yes, if there were owners watching over, Greg's movement since 2 people picking him to win the championship, the fact that he's still in it. Even though nobody's doing well, he's not scoring points, and then just starting to toss players left and right. I could see that being a little bit of a shock to an owner's system.
Well, yeah, and in your guys' defenses, I think that Tim's lack of scoring on a couple of weeks, that's mystifying to all of us. Based upon his roster.
With that outfield, yeah.
Yeah, I don't see that an owner would necessarily say, Tim, you've assembled bad players, because when I looked at Tim's roster going into the year, I was like, there's 4 or 5 guys who are legitimate MVP, like real Major League Baseball MVP candidates. And so, no, I don't think anyone could fault Tim.
Thank God.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just talking about in terms of like our hypothetical firing situations.
Mikey, I've got to think that St. Locash, that Chris's team, does at least get some of your attention.
I don't think that Chris realizes how good Michael Conforto's doing the last 2 weeks, because he's got him on his freaking bench. He's hitting leadoff for the Mets, killing it, and he's starting Polanco over him this week. I don't understand that. Maybe he doesn't know he has him because he's all the way down at the bottom of his minors bench.
He knows. But yeah, he is. That Conforto's on fire right now. Ramirez is another big part of Chris's. Again, that guy's just like I said, he's one of the most underrated guys in fantasy baseball.
Yeah.
Not especially considering try eligibility, middle infield, third base, and outfield. That guy is he's somebody I'd like to have on my spot.
Zobrist
Sure.
plus.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think Chris's outfield's a little weak.
Right, we keep talking about Jay Bruce and how the hell he's still in our league as he continues to outperform the majority of our outfields.
He's one of those guys like we were talking about before, though. He's an 8 and then a 2. He's not a consistent.
We've talked about him specifically in that the Pat Burrell format.
He's one of those guys. He'll win you a week and he'll lose you a week. He's not consistent.
Yep. Yeah, I like to bunch those guys up, wait for them to hit 3 or 4 home runs, put a nice bow on them, and ship them off to your dad usually.
Chris's minors team is nasty though, dude.
Yeah, he's got a lot of guys that have potential for
Moncada,
sure.
Alfaro,
Yep.
He's got a good team.
Yep. Yeah, he should.
But doesn't it seem like that's always the way Chris's team is? Doesn't he always seem to have a good minors team? Isn't there ever going to be a year where they turn into something?
Yeah. He has missed on a few guys, but he's hit on a few guys too. I talk about Chris in that he does just enough movement each year to keep himself in it, to not go into full rebuild. And if he ever did, he'd probably destroy all of us a couple years later, because his minor league system is pretty damn good and has been while they're minors. Like I said, some of them take a little longer than others. But yeah, Chris is going to have a solid ass team in a couple of years. There's no doubt about it.
He had good value with his staff pick right before the draft, because I was jockeying for it, you were jockeying for it, and he didn't want to give it up.
No, and he holds off, and then he ends up stumbling into a fucking Ryan Zimmerman every year. And
didn't you pick 8? Didn't you pick last this year in our draft and get the Dodgers?
Not 8. It was I did pick 8. Yeah, I'm sorry, I did pick 8. It wasn't. Yeah, there's 10 of us, but I picked 8th and got the Dodgers. Yes.
Right. So he could have swapped with you, got a player at 8, and still got the Dodgers.
And still, yeah, knowing the Dodgers were going to drop to 8, shit, that would have been a hell of a deal for sure.
Well, I had 12 staff. 12 staffs that I would have been happy to roll with. So if I was going to trade, as long as I knew I was going to get one of those staffs, but I was going to good player. I mean, look at the players that have been traded for staffs in the last couple of years, man. I mean, you wait till that last minute and you can get good value for your player and your staff pick. Yeah, there was one year I gave up Alfonso Soriano for a staff pick back in the day. You remember that, Jack?
I do.
Before he hit 40 home runs?
I do. Who'd you pick with that staff pick? Do you remember?
I don't.
Of course you don't.
No, I don't.
But we remember those years.
It wasn't worth it, though.
Right, exactly. That's my point.
I got an interesting topic. Who thinks the Rockies are for real? Me.
And you know why? Pitching.
Bullpen.
Their pitching is really good. And it's interesting because we talk a lot about the managers really being life coaches. And his name is escaping me right now. Who is managing the Rockies now? Is anybody off the top of your head, do you know? Who's managing the Rockies?
It's not Walt Weiss anymore, is it? He got canned, didn't he?
He got canned, yeah. Anyway, the coach of the Rockies, and really talking about the fact that, your mindset when you're pitching in Colorado is that we have a better offense than they do, and that you just don't change the way you pitch. And so when you look at the Rockies when they're pitching away from Colorado, their pitching stats are awesome. Like
Absolutely.
They're really good pitching staff. And Mikey, you're right. Their bullpen is solid. If you get the pitching right in Colorado, with the offense that Colorado has, with Blackman, right, with Cargo, and then you've got Arenado, and you've got
we got Desmond coming back. You got
David Dahl.
Right, in the wings. So talking about the offense is gonna. Oh yeah, Murphy. There's another one. So they that could be nasty.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that what Bud Black is doing there is really kind of making sure that the mentality is in the right place for Colorado. And I think that's what that is really what is needed, because we know that just the physics of it, that curveball doesn't curve as much as it does on sea level. Right.
Absolutely.
So we know what the offensive players can do with that, but from a defensive perspective, you are going to win some games 8-7. And that if you're okay with that and you have that set up in your mind, and in my opinion, this is where, we talked about Clint Hurdle being a life coach, right? You think about this mindset and how this mindset could work for us, right? Just in our everyday lives, and understanding what the present situation is, being honest with ourselves about where we're at, and really making peace with that. And to me, that's why I think they're for real. Now, having said that, I still think the pitching in LA is great. And I think that LA has an offensive team that it seems like they just reload. And Kershaw is, I think, having a special season. They've got a good bullpen. They've got a good closer. So I think that's going to be very interesting. I think the Giants are out of it. I think they're done. I think they're done.
I do too.
I think
agree.
that the Diamondbacks are more of a mirage this year than not. I don't think the pitching is there. I think the offense is kind of up and down. I could be wrong.
I think the Diamondbacks don't have a bullpen. Their bullpen is what gives it up. They're starting pitching with Robbie Ray and Greinke. I mean, they're actually Corbin. They're not bad, but they have no bullpen.
Well, in today's game, right, I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So, San Diego, I mean, goddamn.
They've been rebuilding for 15 years.
For 15 years.
It's kind
They've
of
gone
sad,
through four uniform changes during this particular rebuild.
Yeah. So, I to me, I think that, that's a really, I mean, they're 20-12. Colorado is 20-12. Now, Jack, you brought up a good point. You said, look, if this was happening in August, would we be paying attention? Would that matter? But, 20-12 is a great way to start the year.
And, they changed their philosophy. Like, back in the day, they would draft a pitcher like Darryl Kyle, which you just said, the breaking ball doesn't break it. Now they draft pitchers that strike out people, because it doesn't matter if you're playing Colorado. If you don't hit the ball, it's not going to go out of the park.
Right.
So that's why John Gray and people like that, the pitchers that they're coming and bringing in now, the Santazellas and people like that, they're strikeout pitchers.
Right.
They're not going to get contact pitchers in Colorado no more, because they found out that doesn't work.
That's interesting.
I do think we may have seen the best of Trevor Story. I think folks should start getting ready to see Brendan Rodgers here soon. I'm Story's starting to scare me a little bit. I know he's still got that pop, but that guy's striking out at a torrid rate right now.
That was the book on him in the minors, right, Jack? That he just had the holes in his swing, right?
Yep. And they're starting to show more and more. Not that they didn't show a little bit before, but he was able to piece together, the rest of it enough to he was a stud actually in fantasy, but he's still getting some points. Again, the long ball does count, but I think I think we may have seen the best of him already. And like I said, Brendan Rodgers, on the other hand, is going to be an exciting kid, I think.
I gave up a shit ton to get Brendan Rodgers. So to hear you say that, Jack, to hear you say that makes me feel a lot better. Man, I gave up Mazzara. I gave up my first round staff pick just to get Brendan Rodgers. And then he promptly starts the season with a wrist injury, which scares the shit out of me. So, but his ability to get on base, his ability to put the barrel of the bat on the ball has always been there. And that was the thing with Story, was, the question about his ability to, hit the ball enough to be relevant, just MLB relevant, let alone fantasy relevant. And last year was a spectacular year. And I don't know if you remember this, but I actually had Story, traded him to the Dreamers. I don't even know what I traded him for, but I thought, he can't hit the ball, right? So great. He's got great power. He can't freaking hit the ball. So,
I think that last year, Story and LeMahieu were both kicking ass. They're both not doing very good this year, so I believe Rodgers will be a call-up.
When do you think he's going to be called up?
I believe we'll see him come September.
Well, guys, this has been an interesting night. I really appreciate it. Mikey, thank you for being a part of this. I think that
awesome.
is pretty good.
Good time.
I'm just going to wrap up with the fellas here, so I'm going to say goodnight to you, Mikey, and have a good one. I know it's late there.
Greg, it's nice to finally
Mike.
meet you, Greg.
Yeah, you too, man.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, Mikey.
Peace, Mikey.
We'll see you, brother.
Peace. Go Braves!